All right, here we are for our church planning broadcast for June. We're excited to have one of our own, Robin Vincent, sharing some thoughts with us. So we'll just go around to each group, just get a quick update on how everybody's doing, where you're at, remind us of the city and maybe who your team is there with you. I'll give you a minute to think and give you my update since I've been thinking about this longer. But we are in St. Louis, right in the middle of America, training with the apostolic team here. And we're going to go plant a church in California. We'll be moving to Sacramento, which is kind of northern California. We'll be moving there in September. Hopefully, so we're just gathering a team and looking for jobs and places to live. So it's happening. All the books we've been reading are starting to have to put those things in practice. So we will be heading there soon. Let's go over to Robin's crew, Hannah, who's maybe in the next room over from Rob. Maybe you guys can introduce yourselves. Very nice. All right, Nathan, go for it.
Hi everyone, we are in Wednesbury in the West Midlands, and I think city is a bit of a grand name for Wednesbury. The town of 24,000, but it's no less important. I think things are pretty much the same as last month. God is still good, and we're still gathering a team. We've got Ian and Anya and Parastu and Rada. It's great to be with you all again.
Great, thanks guys. Okay, Paul, take it away. That's plenty. That sounds great. Excited for you guys. Stephen, can you give us a quick intro and update over there?
Get us in.
We can hear you. No, not anymore. Something happened. Now we can. Go for it.
Okay, hi, we're in Redditch in Worcestershire, and there's me, my wife Helen, Rita, that some of you know, and Gordon. There are 7 of us all together, but there are 4 of us here tonight. So we're a lot as part of Bromsgrove, which is 7 or 8 miles away. But we're planting here in Redditch. So at the moment we're forming a life group, a home group, small group, whatever you want to call it, and planning church planting in the future.
Excellent. Yeah, sounds great. Looks like we lost Tim. He might be joining the call again, but we'll just let him do that as he's able. Rob, you want to take it away, and when you're ready for questions, let us know, and we'll start firing away.
Okay, well, hi everybody. Particularly, just say hello to Gordon and Rita there. That's lovely to see you guys. I'm now in a slightly awkward position where Bromsgrove is one of the church plants I've been part of, involved in starting, and I've got the guys next door, so I'm going to be well and truly caught out tonight, I think. But anyway, just very briefly then, I'm going to give you my history. The title I was given was Carving Out a Church Plant, and this is the third church plant that I've been involved in with my wife Hannah in the last 16 years. And to use that without wishing to overstretch the metaphor of carving out a church plant, I sometimes feel like I'm in my third woodwork lesson only. And if I probably ever wrote a book on church planting, having been involved in a plant in Birmingham, one in Bromsgrove, and now down in Swansea, I think I'd sometimes still say, if I'm honest, I still don't really know what I'm doing. Now, of course, that's not strictly true, but I guess sometimes as a church planter, my experience has been, you don't always have all the answers sorted out. You don't often know what lies ahead, but what you can do is look back and see where there's little piles of stones where God has been. And I guess that's been our experience really from day one back in 1999, I think it was, or 1998, when we moved to Birmingham to be involved in the Crown, the church plant that's now called the Crown in North Birmingham. Another thing just to say from my own personal experience and my own history, often as a church planter, my experience has been I've often felt kind of like basically outnumbered, very much isolated, and very alone at times. And I'm sure many of you guys will have experienced that yourself, or are experiencing that, or will experience that. And I guess I just right from the get-go want to share one thing in terms of something that I felt God speak to me about as a kind of helpful reminder sometimes when you're church planting, and particularly when you're looking at everybody else and what everybody else seems to be doing and wondering, what are you doing wrong? Why is it like this for you? Why is it not like that for them? Etc. etc. And I am reminded of a story from the D-Day landings, and it was a paratrooper who'd gone into Normandy, and he'd arrived obviously in Normandy overnight, parachuted into enemy territory, and he goes up to his commanding officer and he says to him, sir, we are surrounded. And the commanding officer replies to him, you're a paratrooper, you are meant to be surrounded. And for me, only in this last church plant really have I felt God speak to me through that experience of just reminding me that as church planters, we are meant to be surrounded, we are likely to be isolated, and sometimes it feels very lonely. Sometimes you feel like you're just sitting in a ditch, the rain is just coming down on you, it's no fun. And I just guess I want to say, in one sense, if you're feeling like that, you're probably meant to be where you're meant to be, and you just need to remind yourself of that occasionally. A couple of other comments before we really get into it was that I guess the 3 church plants I've been part of and had the privilege of really leading or being a leader in it has been, you kind of learn from every single one. So if this is your first church plant, you're going to make mistakes and you think, oh man, if I did this again, I'd do it so differently. I personally, either I'm just very poor at doing this, but I've never found a way of not making mistakes and not trying to learn from them. It's just a tough business, really. And of course, none of us, therefore, are going to be really, really good at this at times. But I guess the comfort I have is that actually, again, without wishing to stretch the metaphor, you talk about carving out a church plant. We serve one who is a master craftsman. And right from the beginning, therefore, my encouragement to everybody is just make sure that in your church planting experience, you try and soak yourself in the Bible for your own benefit, really. Soak yourself in the Spirit, soak yourself in the Bible, because for me, it's through the Bible, not surprisingly. I mean, this is obvious stuff, but hey, sometimes we need to be reminded about it. It's the Bible that has sustained me, spoken to me, encouraged me when it's been really tough, when you want to give up, when you don't know what to do next. It's there that I've kind of got the wisdom and the guidance and the conviction and the creativity to find a way forward. So yeah, that's really just a way of introduction. We're obviously down in Swansea, and we've been here for about 3 or 4 years. When we moved to Swansea and from Bromsgrove, my wife and myself and our 2 kids, whereas in Bromsgrove we had a bit more of a team, and we had a team also when we were part of the Birmingham church plant. So I'm now going to move on really to the basis of what I wanted to say this evening. much of what I'm going to say has been basically wisdom nicked from other people, clearly. I've said before, you know, and this is a good one to remember as church planters, you get your authority from one place and you get your wisdom from as many people as you possibly can. And all that I'm going to say, it's kind of hard to filter which bit of it is just leadership and which bit of it is church planting. I'm not really sure I can tell you, because I think church planting, as a church planter, will come out of your leadership. So so you might say, well, this sounded more like a leadership talk than a church planting talk. I'm not sure how you necessarily separate the two. I'm not going to justify everything I talk about with a text from the Bible. I think most of the stuff has got wisdom from the Bible in it. I think most of the stuff is sometimes pragmatic, but I think there's a biblical truth probably running through it. But I didn't want to just spend the evening quoting scripture references to you. I just think what I'd say is, take what I say, weigh it up, reject the rubbish, and embrace or adapt that which you find helpful. So I'm going to speak on 4 areas, and as I go through each area, I'm just going to kind of make comments, really. I've just got bullet points for each area, and hopefully by the end it might be helpful, or you'll have got a few maybe useful nuggets of gold if I'm doing well, or just pieces of bronze at least that will be useful to you. So first of all, the first area is carving out an identity. Then the second area is going to be carving out people. The third area is going to be carving out time. And the fourth area, if I get time, I may just leave it, is carving out resources. So we'll just see how we get on. I don't want to speak too long. So we just go to carving out an identity. The best place to start, in fact the only place to start, and if this is too basic for you, I apologise, but for me, the longer I've been doing this stuff, the more I've realised this is the stuff that I really need to grasp. And it's carving out an identity for yourself. It's knowing who you are. It's absolutely critical. The biggest challenge in church planting is, I think, at times to be yourself. Be like David. Don't wear Saul's armour. When you look at the characters of the Bibles, they were themselves with their warts and all. I can remember arriving in Bromsgrove, going to a house in Bromsgrove. They're quite well-to-do house. They're lovely people. They had a little group of people there. They were looking for a New Frontiers church plant. I arrive as the church planter, and I remember, all seriousness, outside their house, telling myself, speaking out loud to myself, going, I am not a Baptist minister. I am not a Baptist minister. And I really had to fight to be myself and just be the man that God has made me, or the man that God is making me. And on that vein, then, be confident in the call that he has put on your life, no matter how frail at times you feel. I can again remember in Bromsgrove, we were at the front door of our house, and Hannah turned around to me. She said, "You do realise, Robin, you're the only one who thinks this church plant's going to fail." And it was a timely bit of a rebuke, really, and she reminded me about, I had said some prophetic words a few years earlier about being a church planter, and just the fact that you've got to remember you've been called to this. No matter how bad and difficult at times it is, you've got to keep believing and trusting that God has called you. Be yourself, be yourself. So you can learn from others, but don't copy them. You've got to lead from a place of conviction. I think conviction is absolutely vital to leadership. I think conviction is absolutely vital to faith. And it's better to be prepared to fail than fake it. It's better to just go out there, be who you are. Either you fail or you succeed, but you will not fake it. And I think failure is also, just might add, one of the best training grounds we can have. And we've got a absolutely outstanding guy with us down in Swansea, and he, in the eyes of the world, maybe even the eyes of Christianity, would say his church plant failed. Well, I think he is one of the most humble leaders and humble men that I've met. He's learned so much from that really difficult place. So don't be afraid of it. I'm not saying it's fun. I mean, it's pretty pants when it doesn't go right, but don't be afraid of it, and don't necessarily make you think that you're not called to do it. Because often in that place of weakness, for me, I've seen God show up again and again. I've seen God strengthen me again and again. And it's all about this carving out an identity, knowing who you are in God, what God has called you to do. Build around the gifts that you have, not the ones that you don't. Again, I can remember in Birmingham, when we were leaving Birmingham, going to Bromsgrove, I was basically given a bit of advice by a friend of mine. He said, learn to play the guitar. Learn to play the guitar. And I just remember thinking to myself, I'm never going to play the guitar. If you could hear me sing, it's the most appalling sound that could come out of a human being. I have got no musical ability. And I just thought, there's no point. That's not me. I can't do it. Now, I would say that over the period of time that I've been church planting, I've always felt the absence of not having that gift. That's been a real challenge for us. The ability to just be able to lead worship musically, I just can't do it. But you have to just be yourself, and you have to build around the gifts that you have, not the ones you don't. And you just have to make the best of it sometimes. And of course, by God's grace, he gives you others as well. That's probably all I want to say on that one, actually. So then number 2 in carving out an identity, there's kind of subheadings. One was carving out an identity for yourself. And the second one was carving out an identity for the church. Because this, not surprisingly, comes from who you are. The church and the identity of the church will flow out of who you are as a leader. And if you try and fake it and imitate others, in the end, it will all start tumbling down. It will start crumbling, because I just don't think that's the way God does it. And so what I encourage you to do is be a person who prays for the prophetic to shape the direction and the edge of the church, to sort of cultivate what you are. What is it about your church that God has said, this is who you're going to be? And you're going to, form that identity as a church, again, through successes and through failure. So one of the things I most love about the last couple of churches I've been involved in planting is that we do some parties, and I love these parties. And these parties come out of the bit in the prodigal son, Luke 15, when the father is confronting the older brother, and the older brother says, well, yeah, we did this and this and this. And the father says, yeah, but we got a party, because this brother was lost and is now found. And I love the fact that story, for me, has been sort of put into me as part of my story. And then I just love the fact that forms part of the church plant, and it's come through prophetic words. And for me now, just carry it with me as a deep conviction. But the other side of it is that when we were in Birmingham, we did some projects. There was a thing called the Jesus Video Project at the time, and we all thought, this is great, this is going to be amazing, everybody's going to come to Christ. And it was a total failure, really, or it felt like it at the time. Obviously, you never know in reality. And it nearly killed the church doing it. So your identity and who you are is so important that you've just got to be prepared to let God shape you and not just follow methods or the latest ideas. And I'm reminded by a comment that Tony Thompson, who's, I don't know where he is now, he's in Luton, but he was involved in the church planting training years ago. He made a statement once. He said, church planters are not creative enough. And I got the opportunity to ask him, why is that? Why are they not creative enough? And he said his thought his reason was that they are afraid to fail. And I would just encourage you, don't be afraid to fail. In fact, sometimes it's when you take a step out in faith that you will see your greatest successes. And again, I'm reminded of another comment I heard years ago, which was in relation to a church context where they were trying to work out something, a difficult decision. They were worried about the risk. And one of the leaders got up and said, when we started this, we've got it all to gain and nothing to lose. But we're now starting to talk like we've got it all to lose and nothing to gain. And for us at the moment in Swansea, we're facing something. We've got an evening of prayer and fasting. I won't go into any more detail tonight on it. But we're faced with something where the risk is we've spent 3 or 4 years building up a core team, establishing an identity, knowing who we are. We've got all these exciting things going on. The risk is at this point, when we're on the edge of something incredibly exciting, incredibly risky, incredibly faith requiring great faith, the risk is that we'll end up saying, but we've got it all to lose, nothing to gain. And I think, nah, that's not the way of the kingdom. That's not the way of the church. Let's be a people who've got it all to gain and nothing to lose. So I just say, as church planters, don't lose that edge. Don't lose that edge. And then I've already mentioned about imitating people. I just would encourage you, just make sure, just take checks occasionally and say, we're carving out an identity for who we are as a church, not who other people are. And you know, the danger is we imitate, and that's not the same as just learning wisdom from others, but just make sure you do it out of conviction. That's probably the biggest thing. I can remember, again, another moment of walking up a corridor in somebody's house, and in honesty, with tears in my eyes, because they almost, the people, they were a lovely Christian couple, family, were on a barbecue, but they kind of laughed at some of the things I was doing. And, you know, when we have deep conviction of what we do, we you know, it can really hurt when people challenge it, but don't be afraid of sticking to your guns, really, and doing what you believe God has called you to do. So that's really about identity, and I guess that nicely leads on to carving out people, because the church is obviously full of people, and the identity of the church is shaped by many people, not just one leader or a few leaders. So let's just look at carving out identity. First thing I'd like to say is this: people are a great asset. That is the most obvious thing in the world to say, but I think sometimes we can forget about it. I've been in situations where I've heard church leaders speak about their people, you know, in a kind of leaders gathering, not speak about individuals, but just speak about generic people or people I wouldn't necessarily know who they are. And there's just sometimes, I think we fail to realize that people are not just an asset. They're our greatest asset, but they are just more than an asset. They are the solid gold part of the church, and we need to think of people, all the people in our church plant, even the ones that drive us crazy, because of course we drive them crazy, that they are, as Paul says in Romans, they are called and beloved. I mean, we just got to talk about people in the right way, and that's why I say, is this church plant or is this leadership? But I think it's all part of the same stuff. And one of my biggest or commonest errors, I would say, in leadership is to make assumptions about people. I make assumptions about why they didn't turn up. I make assumptions about why they did this or why they didn't do that. And so often I'm wrong. And I make that mistake a lot. I just think you've got to think well of people. You've got to think of people biblically, called and beloved. Think the best of people. They might be your greatest challenge at times, but you know what? They're just like us. You know, we've all got weaknesses and we've all got strengths. And one of the things I'm beginning to learn more than ever, and this is particularly important in a church plant, I think, is that people are more vulnerable than they appear or we first realise. And so I just want to encourage you really to look at the people you've got and just celebrate the people you've got and see them as maybe more vulnerable, because we're all vulnerable and we just don't like to admit it. And if you can do that, I think then you begin to find the real gifting, the real gold that's in people, and you really start to see the church shape around the people that you've been given. And it's a real privilege to have those people with us. And we've seen that here. We've got some people who've been badly hurt by certain circumstances, and one of them recently, his wife said, "Oh, we're just starting to see the real such and such come to life again." I was thinking, man, I've known this person like 2 or 3 years or whatever. I didn't know there was there was more to this individual. And it just shows how long people take to recover. But actually, if you continue to love them and recognize their value in the kingdom of God and in God's eyes, I just think you can get the best out of people for the good of the church. Still focusing on that, I just say some folk will serve for a season in the church, and it will be small, and it will be, but it will be valuable. I think my experience has been that people come and people go, and you think, what was all that about? But I've grown to realise as well that sometimes God just brings people that help form the crowd, and then He seems to move them on. And I would say don't resent it, just celebrate the fact they helped you form a crowd that other people join to. So don't be discouraged when people promise a lot and then they disappear the following week. I think these are just the realities. But also, another experience I had of another church plant was the guy was faced with a position where he could join with somebody else, and it would mean that the church plant went from 6 to 12 people. And another leader who was in a larger church challenged him and said, well, what difference is that going to make, going from 6 to 12? And he kind of was like saying, what's the point of doing that? In my mind, I'm going, man, when you're 6 people and you go to 12, that is huge. And if I was you, I would just celebrate every bit of growth. Don't focus on 50 and 70 and 80. Focus on 6 to 8, 8 to 10, 10 to 12, and just, you know, enjoy those moments and recognize that they make a massive difference. I'm reminded of Terry Virgo. He gave a good bit of wisdom some years ago. Build with those who want to build with you. If you're worrying about what to do with your time and people, I'd say build with the people who want to build with you, because really you're just going to be stretched all over the place. And then a big one, this one for me, grow people, not attendance. Grow people, not attendance. Focus on developing people's character, their gifts, their calling, and maybe most importantly of all, their confidence. I think people grow, or this is my current theory, you can disprove it if you want. I think people grow 4 ways. They grow through resources, so like books and other stuff. They grow through revelation, so you're listening to preaching or their own study of the Bible and God just speaks to them in some way. They grow through real life circumstances, the loss of a job, the challenging times or whatever, and they grow through relationships, just working out life with other people. So I love that bit in 1 Corinthians 12, 25, 26. It says about we rejoice together and we suffer together. And I love saying to people, he's not talking about a meeting there. And if you're not careful as church planters, we fall into the trap of being obsessed with meetings, obsessed with attendance, whether it's Sundays or connection groups, whatever you call them. And I just think, no, do life with people. That's a critical area. And one of the mistakes, I guess, church planters can make, and this all depends around their gifts, is they can think that the best way of growing people is through resources and revelation. In other words, the pulpit and just teaching and stuff like that. And I think, no, people learn through real life and they learn through relationships. So I just want to encourage us to kind of try and grow people around all 4 areas. Try and, you know, remember that when you're church planting, because we can get so focused on a few things. Then I want to also say with people, Dave Devenish speaks, and I think it's in his book Demolishing Strongholds, he speaks about battles for the first fruits. And I've learned afresh recently the importance of battling for the first fruits, i.e. the first new Christian. And when you get that new Christian, you need to invest time, you need to take real effort to listen, to talk, to encourage, and get that person added in. It's almost like an incredible amount of effort on the first ones is key to building a foundation in the church, which means others can follow. And if I'm honest, I'm still trying to work that out. But I just know the battle for the first fruits is really important, really important. And another encouragement as well is, and I think this is a mistake church planters can make, is that we are quite obsessed with creating structure, we're quite obsessed with creating order, and we love to outline what our doctrines are and stuff like that, and that's all good. But I would encourage you to teach people out of sin. I mean, I think this is the biblical way. Teach people out of sin, don't just define it. And in other words, you know, if you want to grow in church, if you want a church where people are being saved, it's going to be doctrinally messy. That doesn't mean your teacher's going to be doctrinally messy, but your church will be. And if you don't believe me, then my encouragement is read the New Testament, because that appears that the churches were pretty messy doctrinally. The teachers, Paul knew what he was about, Timothy knew what he was about, but the church, because if new people are coming to Christ, they're going to come in a mess, they're going to have all sorts of views, and you will spend your life shaping them and teaching them out of sin, not just telling them what is sin. So there you go. I want to encourage you to encourage freedom and creativity and mission with people. We use a phrase, and we used it in Bromsgrove, and we use it down here, is kind of do what you love and change the world while you do it. And so what we're trying to say to people is, you know, look, do something you're passionate about, you want to do, and if we encourage them to do that, that's where they'll build their friendships, that's where they'll invest their time, and we believe that that's where they will may yield fruit for the kingdom of God. And so we've seen one of our best examples has been a amateur photography club for women. That's been really great, just to build friendship and see things, friendships established with people who don't know Jesus. And also there's some other things going on at the moment. Another guy starting something similar but around his passion, and we think that will yield fruit in the end for the kingdom of God. And just I want to make one other comment because I'm experiencing it tonight, so it feels very real, and then we'll just do carve out time and look to finish. It's around trustees. My trustees are meeting tonight. I would just say make sure you choose your trustees very wisely indeed. I'm privileged tonight. My trustees are meeting around a crucial issue, and I'm just reminded again how critical it is that you get those kind of people. You choose the right people. Don't just choose people for convenience. Choose people who are for you, who understand you, who understand what the church is trying to do, because then they will back you. It doesn't mean they're yes men or women, but they will back you when you need it most. And I just say that that is something. Don't just think, oh yeah, we just get some trustees as long as they're sort of like, you know, savvy. I go, no, get people who are for you. Really important in those early days. And then number 3 is carve out time. If I could, everything would be done now. You know what I mean? I mean, you just have it all sorted, wouldn't you? We'd grow to 300, we'd get elders immediately. Everything would be fantastic. We'd never have to worry again. But I just think the Bible doesn't talk about that. And everything takes time. And my encouragement to you is this. Don't make the speedometer of your church planting be dictated by your desire to have wages so that you can go full time. Rather, be dictated by your desire to put foundations in the church that will serve the church and the community is planted in for many years to come. Try and build that in and make that the thing that dictates your speed. You need to be therefore sensible, pace yourself, have a plan that doesn't mean, well, if I don't get a salary by 6 months' time, what am I going to do? I'd say have a better plan than that. I'm not saying anything wrong with that. I'm just saying just be careful around building for the wrong reasons. You know, I mean, God, you know, can work through our weaknesses and our challenges, but I'm just mindful of that sometimes. 2 more points on that. We encourage you as well. When you're church planting, it is so time consuming. And we were given some advice right at the beginning of one of the church plants, which was give it all you've got for 2 years. And quite honestly, Hannah and I did. And then there was a particular moment we went on holiday to Devon, and we were both rather, if I'm honest, we were frightened because we did not know how to relax. And I just warn you about the dangers of burning yourself out. And we use a phrase of when you go on holiday, make sure you take off well and make sure you land well. And what I mean by that is you just make sure the week before you go on holiday, you just start to clear your diary a bit. And when you come back, you don't immediately go into a meeting or into this or into that, but you just pace your life. Because when you get tired and when you get worn out, not only is that not good, you become ill. Being ill on holiday is not a good sign. Maybe that's relevant for somebody tonight. And you just become vulnerable. And I'm reminded of the bit in Revelation. It says the devil hates the baby. The devil hates the baby, wants to kill the church plant as early as possible. And we are therefore vulnerable and we need to be clued up. So don't neglect the basics, you know, don't neglect the basics. But in the same breath, get out there in terms of waking up, being disciplined, and just make sure that you are a person that is disciplined and leading really your church in the hidden areas of your life, not just in the public areas. And so I just want to encourage that. For me, I know over the years I've worked in jobs as well as working for the church, and it requires discipline and as well as God's grace to keep doing that and keep your joy in Christ. Keep your joy in Christ. So quite recently, I learned Psalm 16 because I just wanted to know that by His right hand there are pleasures forevermore, and just to make sure I keep my joy in Christ. And the other thing about time is just avoid false momentum starters. If your church plant's not really taking off, don't think, oh, the way to get this going is to do Sundays. Just look for where God is working and try and ride the waves of that momentum. Now I'm going to finish, I've already probably done my time, but I'm just going to finish with 4 bits of wisdom for you in terms of church planting, just maybe to encourage you. I'm going to quote 4 different characters. The first one is a guy called Dave Stroud, many of you will have heard of, and he talks about church planting. He said, take as many positives as you can. And I can still remember that all these years later and think, good advice. The next one is General Eisenhower. He spoke about this. He said, in preparing for battle, I've always found plans useless, but planning is indispensable. And what he means is this. It's good to have an idea of what you're going to do. I think about you, Mike, going to Sacramento. I'm sure you've got an idea, you've got your plan. Maybe if you've got a little bit of a vineyard history, I don't know, have your 5-year plan. But you know what, when it comes down to it, just be prepared as well that it will also be useless, and try and look for the things that God is doing and go with those. And if you're in another situation though where you think, oh man, this is just so hard, nothing's happening, then I want to encourage you by the words of William Booth. You said, always go on. Something always happens if you just go on. But my favourite church planting quote is from a guy called Po, who is the Kung Fu Panda character. And this is from the film Kung Fu Panda 2. It's right at the end. There's a mighty battle taking place. He's about to set his 5 comrades free from being imprisoned. He does it with some clever, fancy tricks. He's a big, fat, cuddly panda. And one of the characters he sets free says, impressive dragon warrior, that's Po's name, what's your plan? And Po replies, step 1, free the 5 of you. And then another one of the characters who's been freed says to him, what's step 2? And Po says, honestly, I didn't think I'd make it this far. And my encouragement to you is this, probably you don't even know how you're going to get beyond the first stage, is don't worry. God chooses people to do this task. If He's chosen you, you will succeed in one way or the other. Nobody thought Paul would write the New Testament. It was his destiny. He stumbled into it. He didn't look for it. He was chosen. And what we really have to do is not worry about success as a church planter. What we really need to focus on is being faithful with the call that God has given us and try and enjoy it as we go. That's all I've got to say. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Rob. Real helpful, real encouraging. It looks like you're getting some claps from Nathan's group, so that's always good. Well, we got about 20 minutes. We can continue the discussion with some questions. I'm still mulling over a question myself, so I think I'll defer, and maybe we could start with Robin's crew, Hannah and the gang, since they probably have been thinking of these questions for weeks. Hannah, do you guys want to start us with a question? And then we'll go over to Nathan. All right, Nathan, do you guys have a question or comment?
I'm afraid we don't have a question either, but thank you very much, Robin. That was very encouraging and edifying. It was great.
All right. Paul, do you got anything to add or question to ask over there in Kidderminster?
Okay, so yeah, presumably you mean full time, as in you've got a day-to-day job that isn't. Yeah, that's what I thought you meant. Just checking. Okay, firstly, teach people how to sing. Yeah, great question. It's probably at the risk of being misunderstood. It was a phrase I started using recently. I think it was probably, if I may answer it, Rosalind. I don't, sometimes I don't know. If I'm honest, I mean, people are difficult, aren't they? Goodness knows, I am anyway. And really, what it came around was, I think I've seen over the years the desire in church plants, particularly when they get to a certain size, to try and define everything, structure everything. And part of that is to say, this is what we believe. Let's do a membership course around doctrine. And I wonder sometimes whether there's this deep desire for everything to be neat and tidy. And I just don't think, if we're genuinely getting people saved, people coming to Christ, I think they come with all their mess and all their baggage and all their pain, and they make mistakes. And so we've got to teach people out of where they're at. And what I mean is that it's a journey. And if we're not careful, I sometimes wonder whether our membership courses and things like that, if you think about the way they're developed, you can tell that they're developed for Christians. Because I've seen people saved, and I think, man, if they came on a membership course, like 90% of it would just go way over their head. I need to take months teaching them this stuff. And you just teach people from the place we're at. And so I mean, take seriously, we want people to walk free of sin. We want people to walk in, pure lives and, and all that stuff. So don't misunderstand me. I just think you just be careful about structuring the church around definitions and doctrine, but teach doctrine to people in their circumstances. So for me recently, I've been spending time with a new Christian and just teaching him about giving and money, and we spent some weeks just over that for when he gets his first job and making decisions. And that's just taking people from where they're at and just plugging away at them over a period of time. And I guess it's just, for me, it's around the passion of believing that churches should see lots of new Christians. And if we're not careful, we almost make the barrier for them even committing their life to Christ, because they suddenly get all these. Yeah, I just don't think it works like that. I suppose that's probably my answer. I hope that helps. I'm not trying to teach some new thing or dodgy thing. I just think, yeah. I mean, I've got some, recently we know of a certain circumstance, and a friend of mine actually shared publicly at Catalyst. But, he hit the wall, because he has a situation with his family. He's a Christian, probably been about a Christian for maybe 7 or 8 years, and was just talking about how he didn't let God into that situation and got angry and punched the wall. Well, you teach people out of those places, don't you? And I just think that's real life, that's all. So is that kind of helpful, what I meant by the expression? Thanks. Okay, phew. I think in terms of working full-time in a full-time job, I'll just give you my history, which might help either just so on. Yeah, basically in the first church plant I was part of, I always had a job, but I wasn't the main leader there, as it were. I'm not sure that's the best term, but you know what I mean. In the second church plant in Bromsgrove, I had a job for a while. I was a police officer. And I would walk to work and just pray for God's grace upon my life. I would feel like I was going up to an ATM pool and saying, Lord, I just take more of your grace, because at times it felt overwhelming. And I just thought, how can I cope with this? I can't, how can I do I felt like I didn't just think, how can I be inspired from preaching all that? Just too much stuff to do. I've got kids 18 months and I think 4 years. The church is moving forward, and it was just at times it was just hard work. And then I worked full time for that church, and then when I left Bromsgrove, I came down to Swansea, and I now commute an hour and 15 minutes each way a day, and I've been doing that for 4 years, something like that now, working in a job in Cardiff. And if you'd have told me before I came to Swansea, that's what I would be doing. My commute went from a 2-metre commute to my study to a 2-hour-and-a-half commute in total. But what I've seen is God's grace upon me. I've realised now that my capacity has expanded. And the things I do to make it possible is, one, be myself. So don't make myself busy for the sake of it. Just be myself. Go at the pace that I want to go at, not the pace that other people want me to go at. Be disciplined though. I wake up early. I get up about 5:30. I think Hannah gets a bit annoyed because I have lots of snoozes, but you know what I mean. These are the battles we face, aren't they? I usually get up, I spend a bit of time with God, and I study for about an hour, or try and study for an hour. And I'd challenge any leader this. I always love this quote by Spurgeon. He says, church leaders should be ashamed of themselves if they lie in bed hearing the footfall of their church outside on the pavement. And of course, Spurgeon back then, you can imagine guys in his church would have got up really early to go and graft for hours at a time. And Spurgeon was saying, let us be people. If we've got the time, if we're full time or whatever in the church, let's be people who are up as, you know, as our people are up, if you know what I mean. But if, you know, in my circumstances, I try and be disciplined. I try and work hard. I try and be consistent. The best advice I can give anybody, though, is build into your life the prayer for God's grace. I think he gives grace. I wrote, apparently it was one of my best preachers the other day, and I think I wrote it in 30 minutes, if that. And I just think it's the grace of God. If you'd have told me 4 years ago what the life I'd be living now, I don't even know if I'd have left Bombsgrave for fear that I'd just die. But actually, you know, I'm keeping my joy in Christ. And so I think those are my encouragements. I don't know if Hannah would want to add anything on that, because she kind of witnesses the day-to-day, and we do have a little phrase, make sure you're fully present, and that's one of the challenges. So Hans, do you want to say anything on that?
That's great, Rob. Stephen, do you guys have any questions or comments to add?
Yeah, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah, that was great actually. It was very interesting, and there was some good stuff there that we've got some notes and we'll think about it. Two things I'd like to ask really. First one is, if I understood your model about lying in the ditch with the rain falling on you, did I get that idea right? We don't like that. We like the comfortable, quicker route. So could you tell us the other way of doing that, please? And the second question is, in terms of carving out an identity, how much do you think you need to be clear about your vision early on, and how much is it something you work out as you go, depending on what happens and the people you get, and so on? So how much of the vision, the identity, the idea of identity is going to be, do you need early on in the stage?
You don't know how utterly intimidating I find Rita. So I'm thinking, as long as Rita's happy, I'm happy, to be honest. So she's gone with it. That's great. Good for a few. There's nothing like people who know you, watching you and thinking, goodness me. So no, yeah, it's a good question about the model, isn't it? There is no, yeah, it's, there are some people who do it fantastically well, different. I'm not one of them. I'm a very, very slow church planter. I'm very conviction based. I'm not saying those guys aren't. I just mean it slows me down probably. I'm not hugely pragmatic. I've got to believe that this is something I've got to do. One of my friends who leads a large church in the southeast of England, he says he loves being around me because I think differently. I can't help but think sometimes he just thinks I'm quirky and enjoys being around somebody a bit different. And sometimes just to say, when you're in that ditch and you're struggling and you've seen other people succeed or whatever, you do feel like that kind of guy. If I use that image, this is for me anyway, you're sitting in that blimmin' foxhole, the bombs are going off, you feel absolutely pants lonely, like you might as well just die here, and you look out on the coastline and you see those Navy boys and they're shooting their guns, everybody loves them, and then they go back to their nice little beds at night. And you know, and it was so helpful for me because it just kind of removed this kind of, the risk is that I whinge and go, oh, it's not fair for me. And there's this bit in Corinthians where Paul says, in his mercy we have this ministry, and he says, though we are hard pressed on every side, and this is where I said right at the beginning, soak yourself in the Bible, because I can remember God speaking to me through that passage going, Robin, do you know, you are meant to thank me for the privilege of doing this, you know. And so I've remembered that, and that's been helpful to me. The second thing on the identity and the vision, really great question. I think what I'd say on that is, I think you can't really work. I think if we come up too early with a vision, unless God's, you know, some people just really know what they're going to do and all that stuff. And I think this comes around to gifts. So I'm not that kind of guy. So I would never overstate the vision of what we're about, insofar as I am fully convinced that the church grows from the people and the gifts in it. And so actually, if I say, oh, this is the vision, this is what we're going to be, the risk is that that is just focused around my gift and who I am, and not around the body that is going to be built up here. And so I think, for example, in Swansea, we've got some incredibly creative people, and we've got people with a great compassion for the poor. And we are on the brink of something where those two things may really start to come together in a powerful way that will shape the whole future of this church for the next season. And if you'd have asked me like 3 or 4 years ago, what would the church look like, I couldn't have told you any of that. All I knew was who I am. So I would probably talk about the kind of leader I am, the kind of church that I believe in terms of value. So I would always describe myself as not charismatic Christian, and what I mean by that, I fully believe in the baptism of the Spirit and the gifts of the Spirit, but I describe myself as a value-based Christian, and one of my values is keeping in step with the Spirit and being filled with the Spirit. So I think early on, build your vision around your values, what you value. People will build to you, and out of that the gifts will come. You know, you might get people with incredible prophetic gifting, you might get people with a great servant heart, and you know, and I think the danger is we therefore make the church all about us. Do you know what I mean? And there are people that have got great gifts, and the hidden gifts, the gifts that are not commonly, you know, known. I want to make the church about all of that stuff. And so for me, it's got to develop over time. Otherwise, it's going a little bit awry. And I'm not sure I learned that so much in Bromsgrove, so I apologise to you guys. You know, you have to deal with the mess that I've left behind. But I'm learning that more and more. That's for me, yeah.
All right. Well, Rob, that was real encouraging. Lots to take away from that. Looks like Tim is with us, but not on video, and he says he doesn't have questions. So I think we can go ahead and call it. Rob, thank you for serving us and encouraging us. You now have earned the honorary silent wave of the broadcast crew, the silent wave of appreciation. All right, we'll be back together next month. I'll be getting in touch with you guys as that gets closer. Hope you guys have a good night.